We'll now move on to our next panel, so energy and affordability. This session will address the energy landscape surrounding artificial intelligence infrastructure, including increased energy use, customer affordability, generating new resources, and strong customer protections. Our moderator is Chair Kayla Hahn of the Missouri Public Service Commission. Chair Hahn was appointed to the Missouri Public Service Commission in 2023 and was named chair in 2024. Before joining the commission, she served as the governor's senior staff team as policy director. Chair Hahn, thank you for leading this discussion.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy that we are here to discuss the energy landscape surrounding the development and operation of artificial intelligence and data centers. I'm Kayla Hahn, chair of the Missouri Public Service Commission, and we regulate the state's investor-owned utilities, which happen to be some of the largest utilities operating in Missouri. I'm happy to be joined here at this forum by my commission colleagues, Commissioner Maida Kolkmeyer, Commissioner Glenn Kolkmeyer, and Commissioner John Mitchell. It's my goal by the end of this panel the public can be better informed about energy and affordability issues as it relates to AI and data centers, and will be better able to talk to our neighbors about these issues. To help us do that, we have an esteemed panel here. Senator Mike Cierpiot, Chair of the Senate Commerce, Consumer Protection, Energy and Environment Committee. Tim Opitz of Opitz Law Firm, who represents the Midwest Energy Consumers Group. Emily Wilbur, Director of the Division of Energy at the Department of Natural Resources, and Rob Dixon, Vice President of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs at Ameren, Missouri. There is a common set of concerns, public concerns across air, water, and energy regulation when it comes to AI and data centers, like what kind of emissions come from data centers? Is it going to use or deplete all of our resources or energy on the grid? And is my bill going to go up? And the list goes on. These questions are solidified by public polling data. In a March Gallup poll survey, 91% of Americans oppose building data centers in their local area, and only 7% favor building data centers in their local area. Primary drivers of these results indicate that of the 71% of folks opposed, their concerns center around the use of resources, like excessive water or electricity use, pollution, like air, water, and noise, economic concerns, like their utility bills may be higher, or they may lead to increased cost of living, and it may impact their quality of life, like increased traffic, population growth, and land use changes. A few weeks ago, Jefferies released a report demonstrating that data center opposition is intensifying. In September of 2025, only 25% of people were strongly opposed to a data center locating where they live. In May of 2026, that number was now 55%. In Missouri, our governor, Governor Kehoe, signed Executive Order 2602 on January 13th on advancing AI across state government. The executive order set out 5 different state agencies to help oversee this coordinated state effort, including Office of Administration, where the state IT is housed, Department of Economic Development, Department of Higher Education and Workforce, Department of Natural Resources, and the Public Service Commission, because not one area of state government owns the data center conversation. As part of the governor's executive order, during this panel, we're going to hone in on the energy and affordability components, including how increased energy usage impacts customer affordability, the need for new generating resources to meet growing energy demand as a result of new data centers, and ensuring the public is not only not negatively impacted, but benefits from data center investment. I'd like now to turn to our panelists to help us address this set of questions, but first I'd like to have them introduce themselves, tell us a little about their roles, and offer any initial thoughts they have about AI and data centers, including public concerns and benefits. So with that, we'll start with you, Senator Cierpiot.
Thank you, Kayla. I'm Mike Cierpiot. I represent the 8th Senate District in Jackson County, the southeast corner of the county, Lee Summit and Blue Springs. And I am a senator for about 5 more months. I'm turning out. So I think I'm here because I sponsored Senate Bill 4 last year, which is a giant step in my opinion, of relieving some of the concerns people have about this data center deployments. The bill has a lot of protections in it. And quite honestly, I'm still learning a lot of stuff too. That's why I've attended these for the last couple of days to learn more about it. But I'm happy to answer these questions today.
Thank you, Senator.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Opitz. I represent large energy users in Missouri through the MECG and in other states through various entities as well. For my career, at least the last 15 years or so, I've focused on energy policy, particularly the rates, either as a residential advocate working for the commission itself. I was general counsel at a renewable energy nonprofit. Now I've represented large users. I just want to, I guess it's apropos of it. I want to thank Commissioner Poston. I thought his approach was really good. I particularly appreciated the grace he has given to the opponents. I mean, it's a little scary when I walked in here and I saw all the police officers like, oh my God, what is going on? You know, but I hope that with his example that the people here who are reporting on this or who are in here who are opposing it, trying to learn more, that you extend the same grace to the people in this room because while, you know, for example, the Senator and I disagree on some aspects of SB4, I think that he's trying to do what's right by the community, and I think everybody in this room is trying to do what's right by the community in our state. So I appreciate the grace that Commissioner Poston gave. So back to the panel. Sorry for indulging that. Back to the panel. So I focus on affordability. What does that mean? I guess it means for rates, how much you pay. And I had done some research a little while back, and from 2005 to 2025, the electric rates in Missouri for residential, commercial, and industrial customers has gone up over 100% in that 20-year period. Now, I was interested in that, so I went back to the late 70s and looked at it, and we had a period of growth in building power plants, and so there was a period of 10 or 15 years of increases to pay for that. Then there was a period of about 15, 20 years of rate decreases occasionally. And so for this last period, we've looked at big increases. Now, that trajectory, when I looked at that, was not good. You know, and the impact that is felt by customers, businesses, people in our community is, I was in a case in Kansas, and the utility CEO testified that about 25% of its customers struggle to pay their utility bills. I was in a case in Missouri, a water case. There was testimony in that case that about 16% of their customers struggled to pay their bills. I met last week with a large industrial customer in Missouri who said they are months behind on their bills. They're struggling to pay their bills. So it's not just residential customers. Utility rates are a problem. So what do we do about it? What is causing rates to go up? To peel back a little bit on utility rate making, the utilities are monopolies. If you're in their area, they're your provider, and they have to provide that service to you. And in exchange, they get to charge you for the cost incurred to provide that service. That includes everything. The labor, you know, their cost of capital, their debt, when they have to spend money to provide you service. And typically, at least with the commission, we recover those costs over time. And so we look at a time period where we're trying to recover the costs that are incurred to serve you with you're paying that cost. That's from all customers. So what I looked at, what makes rates go down? Time without spend. That's not an option right now. We've got load growth coming, data centers, additional manufacturing, maybe other stores, hopefully residential, people moving to Missouri. So we've got to continue to upgrade our system and spend money. What has caused rates to go down? In 2019, 2020, there was a slight decrease due to federal tax cuts going down. With the amount of spending we're doing, federal taxes could be zero and you're still going to see increases in your utility bills. So then the last component is efficient use of the system. So what is an efficient use? Somebody who's using a lot of power and they're using it consistently. You know who fits that category? Data centers, manufacturing, big box stores. Because we know how much power they're going to use. You size your system to that, and then they're using that power that can be recovered, those costs over their power usage. And the hope is that revenues from that usage will exceed the costs over time. So this is all about AI and data centers. How do data centers fit into that? They can be efficient users of the system. People talk about them causing costs to go up. While there are data centers, these hyperscales have not been built into any rates or the power plants needed to serve them. So we're going to see some period that's going up. Data centers present a few issues. Size, they're causing us to build new generation. And then they're kind of a unique user in their ramping. And so those revenues may not match the time where the costs are incurred. So what I try and do and what I'm focusing on the next few years is trying to address that time so that we are matching the revenues to the cost as they're incurred. And it's my hope that by doing so, we can all be better off, because when people are better off, we're all better off. So sorry to go on long.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. Emily?
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Wilbur, and I am the Division Director of the Division of Energy, and we are a part of the Department of Natural Resources. Our focus in the division is to advance energy policies that support affordability and reliable energy sources in Missouri. This energy is the driving force for many sectors, including manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, and the defense industry. And we believe it is an important part of what Missouri provides to these industries to sustain the basic needs of modern life here, and to also help with military preparedness. And so we do this by providing information and educational outreach to provide the information to the public and to policy makers across the state to understand what the different varieties of energy sources are and what the pathways to reaching that energy independence looks like. And I'm happy to be here and look forward to the discussion on this panel.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Dixon with Ameren, Missouri. If you're not familiar with Ameren, we're the largest investor-owned electric provider in the state of Missouri. We serve roughly the eastern half of the state. We have some service territory that touches just the outskirts of Kansas City and goes all the way down kind of towards the boot heel. So we're on that kind of eastern half of that dividing line. A little bit about me, just to start off. I think it is incredibly fortunate that this panel is immediately following the one that we just had about the economic development and the community impact. My entire career has been in economic development prior to coming to Ameren, and never before have these two themes been woven together like they are today. Economic development, the future of our state's economy, the future opportunities for Missourians to get a good job, take care of their families, has never been more intimately intertwined with energy. And so just to think about what the governor talked about earlier today, the name of the game is to do that responsibly. The name of the game is to figure out what are the right state policies that we need to make sure that when these large companies are looking at coming to Missouri, making that truly historic investment that we just heard about and creating the jobs and creating all the community opportunities, that the policies are in place to do that responsibly for all of us in the room, our customers certainly. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk about this today. We're fortunate to live in a state that has a bill or has a law on the books like Senate Bill 4. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about how that works and why that's an important piece of the responsibly serving data centers and responsibly bringing AI to Missouri. But that's an important theme that we'll talk about. And Tim brought up some really good points about affordability. I know we'll get into that a little bit more too, but at the end of the day, as an electric provider, there's other investor-owned utilities, there's co-ops, municipal electric providers, gas providers, water. At the end of the day, our job is to provide that critical life necessity resource to our customers. And we also, at the same time, do that, we have to help support economic growth in our state. And again, there's never been that confluence of those two things like we're seeing right now. And so thanks for having me as a part of the discussion today, and I know we'll get into the details here in a little bit.
Thank you, Rob. It is an exciting time to be in both public service and the private sector around the energy industry. It's a completely transformative time, and we can look forward to harnessing it. To begin, I'd like to start our discussion with a high-level overview of our energy position, which is that we're needing to build additional generating capacity to serve both existing residential customers, because we all use our iPhones all the time for things like ChatGPT, as well as new large customers like data centers. What do we think got us into this position of needing to build additional generation now, and what do we plan to do about it? So with that, Tim, I'm hoping you could help provide the historical overview relating to the capacity position, and then general interest in keeping rates low to incent that business development.
Sure, I'll give it a shot. I did kind of address it a little bit, jump the gun there, but when I look at where Missouri has been, we have had relatively flat load growth for a number of years, I think as long as I've been working in energy here. And so there hasn't been a big need to build generation. The generation I've seen in the last 10 or 15 years has been a lot of solar or wind, and then we've seen retirements of certain plants, whether it be for economic reasons or for court-ordered reasons. And so we're starting to see, I think the AI, I don't know, revolution or however it was characterized earlier, is showing the need for more power. And, just with utilities, when they need to, they have an obligation to serve. So if people want that power, they've got to build the power to serve them. And so it becomes incumbent on the Public Service Commission and the utilities and all the stakeholders to try and size it right. I think your IRP rules will try and do that. And then, we go from there and address it on a case-by-case basis. But, it was really, we're in a period of flat load growth. In fact, we had, Ameren had its largest customer for a long time, go offline, and that was Noranda. And so they had excess capacity for a while. But, with data centers, hopefully we'll continue to see growth and more people putting their shoulders to the wheel and paying for some of these fixed costs.
Tim, I do want to touch on something you touched on in your opening, which is that you represent historically large users. Can you talk about the size of users that you typically represent? And then Rob, if you could kind of talk about the size of the users that you're now looking to serve. And I know you mentioned earlier, Tim, you mentioned it, and Rob did as well, which is, as a regulated monopoly, our utilities are both have both a right and an obligation to serve any customer that locates in their territory. So if you just want to touch on those, I think it would be helpful for folks to know just typical size of an economic development project as to what we're seeing now.
So within our coalition, we've got anywhere from grocery stores up to auto manufacturers, and so there's a pretty broad range there. But I was on another panel, and a consumer advocate leaned to me and says, well, you should be more aligned with the residential customers because even your largest user is far closer to a residential user than they are to the data centers. And just in terms of numbers, that's mostly true. So I think the large load tariff is 75 megawatts. And so, somebody like, I'll just say within Missouri, somebody like a Noranda was huge, but there's nobody like them right now. So significantly smaller than 75. I think there's people who want to grow. I mean, with automation, my understanding is a fully automated distribution center might be 20 megawatts. So that's huge to me, but compared to 1 or 200 or 400 or 800, I'm closer to a residential customer.
Thank you for the context. Rob, I think you could probably add some color on that too.
Sure. So just to level set on the first place, the numbers may not mean a whole lot to you, but I want to kind of help set the sense of scale here. So a rough estimate of, say, a big box store and their general demand would be about 1 megawatt, roughly 1 megawatt. A big manufacturer might be in the 10, 15, 20, 30 megawatt range. Some of the large data centers that are locating around the country are exceeding 1,000 megawatts. That's a gigawatt, if you've heard that term used before. Our largest customer on the system in Ameren, Missouri today is somewhere between that 25 to 30 megawatt range. So you really get a sense of the step change that we're talking about with this new industry as it emerges. Back in 2019, which seems like it was eons ago, but that was, 6 years ago at this point. Back in 2019, the average size of an economic development project that was looking at locating somewhere in Ameren, Missouri's service territory was about 3 megawatts on average. By the end of, I think, last year, it was closer to 200 megawatts on average. So Tim's exactly right that we went through this period of really flat load growth. There's lots of reasons why. It more or less follows the economy and economic growth. It also had to do with the implementation of energy efficiency equipment and things like that. But if you go back in time, really the last big spike we saw as an industry in electric use was when everybody decided to put air conditioners in their house. And really since that period, it's been flat until yesterday, basically. And then it all of a sudden, overnight, the entire landscape changed. And in order for the state of Missouri to continue to have success in economic development, the electric providers, the electric industry, the infrastructure has to be there to support that growth. And that's why, again, kind of, I know we'll get to it, having policies in place that allow that growth to happen responsibly are critically important. Because we're in this period, as an industry around the country, this is not a unique to Missouri situation. This is happening in every single state, in most every single community, and every electric provider around the country is dealing with it. And we've got to find a way to thread this really, frankly, difficult needle in order to help make sure that Missouri continues to be a place that can attract investment, attract jobs, and create opportunities for people who live here to work and play and do all the things that we want to do to support our families.
That's going to be a great transition. So right now we've had a long history of flat to declining load growth, which means we haven't needed to build large new electric generating units in decades, but we are kind of seeing the end of useful life of a lot of our existing infrastructure. We see new load coming on, including from residential users who are starting to use electric cars. We have connected homes where we can start our ovens or open our garages from our phones. So we're ever more interconnected, and that's driving demand on the residential, on the commercial side. As advanced manufacturing continues to electrify, there's just a lot of demands. And then you add data centers are extremely intensive energy users to the system. So we are needing to attempt to turn the page and set a new direction for energy policy in Missouri. So I'd like to start by talking about what the state of Missouri has done or is planning to do to ensure we have sufficient electric generation moving forward. One of the questions that keeps coming up amongst concerned citizens is, are these data centers going to suck up all the energy on the grid? So I'd like to talk about the plan to make sure that we have sufficient electric generating capacity on the system so that when folks want to turn on their lights come on. And Senator Cierpiot, you're instrumental in that process, so I'd really like you to start kind of give us the plan.
Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, Senate Bill 4, the whole point of Senate Bill 4, it had a lot of smaller parts, but the main part of it was there was many of us that thought that Missouri and much of the country had gone too green too fast. And renewables are great when they work, but they're not dispatchable, they're not 24 hours a day. And so part of the bill was to incent utilities to put in gas turbines. Those are the most reliable ones. we have now because we can't build coal anymore. So gas turbines are the best way to have dispatchable power generation, and it can be turned on and turned up quickly. And so Senate Bill 4 allows companies to recover those costs a little quicker than they could have on other generation means. It also has a part of it that's called the Integrated Resource Plan, and it's an ability. The IRPs have been around before, but they are PSC rules, now it's statutory, and it requires the companies to come up with a plan, a long-term plan, and get pre-approval with all the challenges that are there today for people and consumer groups to challenge these plans, but to get a long-term look, to give the PSC more confidence that reliable, affordable power is well into the future, and also gives the companies more of ability to plan it out and to be ready to deal with those. So between those two items, I think it makes it much more likely that companies will put out power that's reliable and affordable. And with the large load tariff that was recently implemented by the PSC, it's going to be, I think it's going to be very obvious very soon that they're paying their way. And I also want to add something about we talked about earlier. If you remember during COVID, the supply chain issues we had with all kinds of manufacturing all over the world. That made it really apparent to a lot of people, particularly people in leadership positions, that we've got to bring some of this manufacturing back home. President Trump is trying to do that. I think many presidents have tried to do that, but I think there's a real effort now in bringing manufacturing back home. And all those people need more power, as Rob was talking about. So as they bring that home, it's really good for the country. It's good for blue-collar workers, but we have to have power to accommodate that. If you remember 30 or 40 years ago, I'm pretty old, I remember this, in southern Missouri and around the state, brown shoes, we had shoe manufacturers all over in all kinds of small towns. They all went overseas because of our ridiculous trade policies the last 3 or 4 decades. Those kind of manufacturers coming back to these small towns, as you heard earlier about the counties that were up here, when they leave, some of these cities crater. And the goal here is to make it possible for those manufacturing to come back and help these communities thrive and survive. So that was behind Senate Bill 4, was the idea of making this win for the consumers, win for the companies that are doing it, and make Missouri more competitive in this space.
Thank you, Senator Cierpiot. I know the State Department of Natural Resources under the Division of Energy is also looking to make sure we have sufficient electric generation moving forward. Emily, would you like to talk about that?
Sure, yes. And so when the president came into his administration earlier, one of the first things that he did was he issued an executive order that really focused on energy dominance. And so early on in the governor's administration and under the leadership of our current director of natural resources, we embarked on this journey to develop a new state energy plan. The last time we did this in the Division of Energy was back in 2015. At that time, the focus was on looking at taking advantage of federal funding that was focused on solar energy, renewable energy, intermittent, and those are all intermittent sources. And since that time, well, at that time, we were an exporter of energy in the state of Missouri. Since that time, and despite the level or demand growth that we've seen in this state, Missouri has turned into slowly a importer of energy instead of an exporter of energy. And what that means is that costs are going to go up for transmissions for the ratepayers, and that means that we lose control over how we determine what the rate is, the cost to the ratepayers is. And so what we're doing with our state energy plan is we're looking at the energy landscape, and we're trying to see what is it that we could do to bring energy generation back to the state of Missouri, and what does that energy mix need to look like. We're exploring different potentials for future energy mixes, and we're also looking at potential pathways for reaching those energy mixes. And so we're really looking forward to releasing this energy plan. We've engaged with a consultant by the name of Guidehouse, and we've been looking at energy demand modeling, we've been looking at economic modeling, and we're really focusing on what those policies need to look like in order to get us to that point of meeting the energy demand in Missouri. We look forward to releasing that information. I can't really divulge what's in it right now because we're still in the process of reviewing that information, but we plan on releasing that state energy plan in September. And we hope to use the information that comes out of the state energy plan to inform legislation that may come out in the next legislative session.
Thank you, Emily. I think there's some components within Senate Bill 4 that now Tim and Senator Cierpiot have touched on, which is ensuring that we have sufficient generation moving forward. And it was really 3 prongs, right? Short term, we're going to immediately incent new gas-fired electric generation. Medium term, we're going to make sure our utilities have enough capacity to meet their load in the short term or in the medium term. And in the long term, we're going to make sure we're appropriately resource planning. Can Rob and Tim, can you talk about those short, medium, and long-term goals and how we plan to meet those, and how we're using them now?
So the goals are to make sure that everybody has the power they need to produce the products that my customers produce, or to generate the AI that data centers will use, or residential need for their own energy needs. And so to me, that's the goal there. I know back this fall, the chair of FERC, which is a federal regulatory commission, was talking about how they need every kilowatt hour available in the modern era. And I think that's probably true. I mean, if it's not AI, we're going to see EVs, we're going to see other manufacturing. I hope a lot of it in Missouri. But certainly we need all of our energy. So within SB4, there was certainly incentives and to some extent, I guess there will be mandates, depending on how the IRP rule goes, to build out generation to serve these customers. And to the extent that I and my clients have opposed it, it comes down to some of the accounting mechanisms that shift the upfront payment to existing customers for plants or equipment that will benefit everybody who may be coming onto the system on a later time period. So that's really where the rubber meets the road for my group in terms of that. But I do think that for my view of SB4, I think it does accomplish what the senator wanted to do, which was get people to build more gas plants now. My dispute is whether that's equitable and, whether it makes sense, because, in this session we had bills at the Missouri legislature that were talking about banning certain generation resources, which to me makes no sense. If we need every kilowatt hour we can get, it's crazy to even consider a ban of any kind. So that's kind of a long-winded way to say I think that the senator and the legislature's bill has done is accomplishing what they intended to do, and I will continue to work to make sure that it's equitable and do what we can to protect existing customers, because I hope in the long run, if data centers pan out, and I hope they do, that we will all be better off.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I agree that I think the senator's bill, Senate Bill 4, was exactly the right policy for Missouri at exactly the right time, because it was right as the load ramp or the demand increases that we saw and talked about were really facing our state. And so we needed, like I said, a policy framework to deal with that. And if you're not familiar with integrated resource planning, you can't just build a power plant on a whim. It's a very long-term asset that takes a long time to build, and they are in service and serving customers for a long time. So you have to take a long-term point of view on how you build this infrastructure at the same time while we're facing this very near-term increase in electric demand. So the utilities have an integrated resource plan. It's a 20-year look out into the future, trying to look at supply and demand resources that are going to be needed. And at Ameren, we updated our plan last year to really look, because of the increases in electric need that we were seeing. The goal of it is to provide the lowest cost energy, the lowest cost reliable energy to our customers and to meet the demand that we have out there. And we look at a variety of different types of resources. And so part of that plan called for 5.3 gigawatts of additional generation by 2030. Now that's to serve all of our customers, not just data centers. It's to help the transition as old technology and old resources, generators, are needing to be upgraded and replaced over time. But 5.3 gigawatts by 2030 is what that plan calls for. And we actually have about half of that in progress at some varying point of it along the way right now. I wanted to just touch on one piece specifically because we were just talking about gas generation. But back in March, we announced plans to build a 2,100 megawatt combined cycle gas generation, which is baseload generation at West Alton, which is out in St. Charles County at our Sioux plant. So these things are happening. The bill that was passed is helping the state to move forward and to meet that energy need. And I think the citizens of the state of Missouri, rightfully so, need to have an electric system that is reliable, that produces that reliable energy at the lowest cost, and that we can look folks in the eye and make sure that when that switch gets, you turn that switch on, that the power is going to be there, and all these pieces are in place to ensure that to happen. Now, this is an ongoing process, long-term planning, and so we expect to update our next version of the plan later this fall. And again, we'll be taking a look at that long-term horizon for supply and demand and making sure that we have the right resources in that portfolio, not just today, but out into the future to help Missouri continue to grow.
Appreciate that. So now that we know that Missouri is on a path to ensuring that when folks turn their lights on, they actually come on, we also need to make sure that residential, other industrial, commercial customers are not negatively impacted by data centers and data center development. And not only are they not negatively impacted, but how they benefit. And I think this state has been fairly proactive. We're one of the first states to have protections from Senate Bill 4 to help protect other customers from data centers and make sure that everyone just pays their fair share of costs, whatever that is. And so Senator Cierpiot, again, sort of being the tip of the spear on this, if you'd like to touch on that first, and then I know other panelists will have views on what we've done to try to help protect customers.
Sure. No, that was really important part of the bill, is to make sure that my grandmother wasn't put on the hook for building new generation for one of these data centers. Because we're very aware in Jeff City, when people get upset about their power bills, we hear, all the members hear about it, and it's something that gets a lot of attention. And so we were very aware, and I think between Senate Bill 4 and your large load tariff that recently has passed, I think the protections are in to make sure that these costs are paid by the people that are requiring them, as well as protections so that for long term they're there. The financial letters they sign to commit to the future, and I feel very comfortable that that long term the regular folks back home, the small users, the residential users, will be protected in this. And I want to thank the PSC because you guys, we empowered you to do that, asked you to do that, and I think with what they've come up with is a really giant step in that direction.
If I could add to that from how does that policy framework, that bill, maybe translates into working with customers and how the Senate Bill 4 ensures that other customers are protected from those large data centers. There was a question asked earlier this morning in the session. I don't know if the person that asked it is still here or not, but it was something like, shouldn't we have some policies in place to make sure that these large users are paying their fair share and that there's regulations, et cetera, around it? Not only should we do. It's the law of the land in the state of Missouri right now. The governor put his signature on the bill that the legislature passed. The Public Service Commission has already approved what's called a large load tariff, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. That's exactly the types of protections that are in place to ensure that when a new data center like the ones we've been talking about all day come into our state, that there's a framework for how to bring them on board. We have that as a law, and as a Missourian, native Missourian, I am incredibly proud to live in a state that has already thought about some of these things, that as you look around the country, they're literally still trying to figure it out. We have done that already. We have that in place. If all of our customers right now, Tim mentioned it, we have an obligation to serve them. If a person shows up and they buy a house or they have an apartment or they open a new business, we have to serve them. And we're proud to do so, but we have to. There's nothing in any of that structure that says they can't leave. And when they call us and say, we're out of here, they disconnect, we shut their service off or whatever they want to do, that, and the rest of the system has to go on. That's fine when you're talking about a house or when you're talking about a relatively moderate-sized business. The entire landscape is different when you have a very large data center or a large user that's in the hundreds and potentially thousands of megawatts. And so the Senate Bill 4 and the large load tariff that was passed led to essentially a contract structure that we enter into as the utility with these large customers when they want to take service, electric service. It's a contract that puts in place a number of provisions that we enter into. There's financial guarantees that customer has to provide, and that's really to make sure that should they not deliver as promised, that the rest of the customers of the utility are left holding the bag. And so I know I went on at length there. I might pause, but I can also get into a little bit deeper details on it, but I think the Director has something to say.
I'll let you talk a little bit more in a little bit, but
Thank you. Go ahead. Stop.
it was interesting earlier in this morning. I think it was Dr. Chen who had kind of put up a slide that talked about to put it in more layman's term on what the data center is and comparing it to maybe the brain and the nervous system, and he likened power to the blood, right? And so I really like that analogy because it's very true. I mean, for a data center, it is the blood, it is the thing that makes the data center operate, but it is true for everybody. Without power, you are not going to have job growth or economic development. It is the blood of a community, and so it is. And also Governor Kehoe, when he was speaking this morning as well, he says rates are going to go up, and they will go up, but we want to be able to look at it responsibly. The DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, we serve with the PSC and economic development to look at these data centers and AI and development, and our role on that in that executive order is to look at those current regulations out there and see what the best practices are, see where those gaps are, and see if there are other policies or other practices that are a good fit for Missouri. Senate Bill 4 does talk about the large load tariffs, and it serves as a good framework for the investor-owned utilities. But the state of Missouri also has areas that aren't covered by the investor-owned utilities, like co-ops and municipalities. And so we want to look at those good practices, see what's good for Missouri, and see if we can make sure that the authorities and those abilities for everybody in Missouri to get those rate protections and work with the co-ops and the munis to make sure that those are available to everybody in the state of Missouri. So that's kind of what we see our role is in protecting ratepayer.
That's really helpful, Emily. The commission only regulates investor-owned utilities. It doesn't regulate the city-owned electric utilities or the rural electric cooperatives, which are governed by boards. So it is really important when we're talking about this to know that the large load tariffs really apply to the larger utilities, but cities and co-ops are looking at this as well. And while they don't have the same hyperscaler interest, they definitely do have data center interest. And so they're looking to take the provisions that we've adopted at the Public Service Commission and apply those to their cities and potentially their co-ops. So there are certain features that I really want to talk about. When we say large load tariff, it's really just a contract. We just use different language in utility to make it hard for everyone else to understand. It's just a contract, and there's some features of those contracts that I think are important for folks to know. Rob, I'm going to let you kind of talk about that, but we are getting sort of close on time, and I know that there was some audience questions, so if you would go over that, and then we might open it up for just a few questions.
You bet. So start off with this contract structure. We call them an electric service agreement. It's based on the large load, it is the large load tariff. It's based on Senate Bill 4, but the contract structure applies to any customer who's requesting 75 megawatts or more. So already you know that that's quite a bit larger than the largest existing manufacturers that are out there. So 75 megawatts or more, if they're connecting to the transmission system, first and foremost, they have to pay 100% of all those direct upfront costs that they need to interconnect to the grid. Those don't get shared or passed on to anybody. They have to agree to pay for those 100% upfront for any of those upgrades that are needed to directly interconnect them to the grid. They have to commit to a long-term contract. We're talking about 12 to 17 years of contract length that they have to agree to these financial commitments, and that automatically extends over time once they get to the end of that contract structure and if they continue to be on the system. Really important protection here is that they have to commit to paying at least 80% of their minimum demand, even if they use less power than they requested. Because sometimes what happens, a business will come in and they'll say, we want X amount of power, but for whatever reason, they don't actually use as much as they thought they did. This guarantees that they're on the hook for at least 80% of those demand charges. They're paying for 100% of everything they use, but they're paying for at least 80% of those demand charges of what they request. They have to post collateral worth 2 years of their minimum bills. And that's really important as you think about building the infrastructure and ensuring that the financial risks to other customers are mitigated. They have to post collateral. We monitor that. We monitor their creditworthiness to make sure that they're posting solid, good collateral. And if for whatever reason they would decide to terminate their contract, say they decide to leave and their business model changes, they're on the hook for still reimbursing the customers of the system 5 years worth of those bills. And all of those are in place in order to make sure that the risks to everybody else are mitigated. And these are really detailed. They're policy frameworks. They're available on our website if you're at all interested in this. The tariffs of the state of Missouri are all public records. You can look at it. But rest assured, when a large load customer is announced in our service territory, in Evergy's, there's a framework like this in place to protect other customers. And again, as a Missourian, that's exactly what you want to see in order to make sure these things go forward in the right way.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, including, what are we doing to build electric generation to make sure folks' lights come on? What are we doing to protect residential customers from data centers? And how do we make sure that that's a benefit to existing customers? So there could be some questions out there, so I just want to ask folks if there are questions in the audience. If there is a question, do we have a microphone? No, we don't, so you're going to have to speak up kind of loud. Go ahead. Yes. That's a great question, and I think we probably do have some responses to that.
Well, they call that CWIP, construction work in progress, and that was relaxed for gas turbines only. So it's for gas turbines, and the reason for that, and what it does is allow them really to collect their finance charges, start collecting that. It's kind of like making an extra house payment a year, because those charges are going to be rolled into their bill eventually. They're going to be recovered. This just lets them recover them a little earlier for those charges. So long term, it will cost less to consumers. Short term, it'll cost more. That's kind of the thinking behind it. And the incentive was there just so they'd be more likely to deploy gas turbines. You might have a different view of that too.
Yeah, I've got a little different view than that. So QIP or CWIP in some states. So the people I work with who are energy managers, they hate QIP. I mean, they're big companies. They have run the math and they say, yes, the cost of a gas turbine is X. The way rate making works is that's recovered over time. If we pay the financing up front, it's going to reduce the overall value, overall cost of that plant. But the way that shows up on your bills is incremental. So with QIP or CWIP, we're paying up front as it's being constructed. There still has to be a rate case in Missouri. Some states it's a rider. So we're still looking at it. And let's say the math that my colleague had done, if we saved $136 million over the life of that plant by paying up front, the way rate making is done, we pay that up front, and it would take 25 years after the plant is in service for us to realize benefits of that. So after 25 years, yes, we're all going to be better off. 25 years from now is a long time. There may be people, 25 years from now, there will be people in this room who are not alive. So we know not the day, the hour, the time, but so that is the problem with QIP that my customers don't like. To put a fine point on that, I'm not an engineer. I probably couldn't have got into science and technology. I was a liberal arts, humanities type major, but I did study economics. So the concepts here that I'm worried about with QIP are time value of money and opportunity cost. In Missouri, it's been a few months since I've looked at it, but the average credit card debt was about $5,000. Now the average interest rate on that is over 20%. So are you going to save 2% on your utility bill 25 years from now and forego the opportunity to pay down on this huge credit card bill that you have? That is not a good decision financially. And that's what QIP forces us to do. And so let's say you're not in that. Let's say you're a little more advantaged. Let's say you don't have credit card debt, but you are looking to put money into your retirement. Last year, if you put money into the Dow or the S&P, you made 25%. So by paying a little more on your utility bill through QIP, we don't have QIP right now, but in the hypothetical next coming years, you're foregoing that opportunity to make those dollars everywhere else. If you are a manufacturer or a grocery store, you're not investing that money. You have less money to invest in your operations. You have less money to invest in your employees. So in the long run, yes, absolutely, we will see some savings. Life is short. I'm worried about what people can do in the short-term period here, because at least from an economics perspective, it makes more sense to give people the control over their dollars. I think that from a political perspective too, but that's here nor there. But so, and then I'll add to that to say, if there is a plant where the utility needs to spend money and it might put them in a tough financial spot to finance it, I think the group that I work with has demonstrated in recent years a willingness to be a partner with the utility. I'm thinking about a case, and it was publicly filed, so I don't think I'm foregoing anything. We reached a stipulation agreement to sort of do some bridge accounting related to a Castle Bluff generating facility. And to the extent that there is an opportunity or is a future opportunity for that, I hope that the utilities call me or email me, and I'll talk with them, and I'll talk with my clients about that, because I want them to be strong. They are a partner in my customers' operations. They're a necessary service, and we just want to make the right decisions for the people of Missouri and for my customers. So that's how I view QIP.
If I might just clarify this, and I will
I think Rob can address that, but just since he's a utility and I'm kind of the consumer, maybe I'll soften the sting here. But if there is a rate case and they're taking power, they will be paying towards that. Data centers, I don't know what's going to be in the ESAs. I know the large load tariffs are public, but there's certain documents that maybe it's out there, I haven't seen it. And so there may not be total coverage if we're building a power plant or 5 power plants to provide service to these 10 data centers. There's a ramp-up period. And so depending on what's in their ESAs, it may be covering it and it may not be. I don't know. Rob probably knows.
Yeah, and they're not exempt from any of those sorts of situations. I mean, a data center is a customer. They're a very large one, but they're a customer like everybody else. So they would not be exempt. They're not receiving any discounts or incentives on their utilities at all. QIP and the entirety of how rates are adjudicated in Missouri would still be under the purview of the Public Service Commission when that time comes, and they would not be exempt from that either. No, ma'am.
I think it might be helpful too, just for context, when those construction work in progress charges are accumulated through the build period, in order for the utility to be able to recover those funds, they have to come through a general rate case at the commission where the commission reviews all of those costs. The commission then does also have the discretion to properly assign those costs to the cost causers, which is generally a principle that we try to apply when we do utility rate making. But again, this is in the future, but typically that is how it could work. So I can foresee that large users will be paying their fair share, and that is the goal of what the commission has been required to do from the General Assembly as a result of Senate Bill 4. So I hope that provides some clarity. Are there other questions? There are other questions. In the red?
I want to touch on a little bit about renewable energy. I know y'all talked just a little bit about it, but are there any plans to use renewable energy to kind of offset those costs? And if so, what are the ways that it could offset or not offset the cost, and kind of just like renewable energy in general with data centers?
Yeah, I'd be happy to touch on that. So first off, Ameren, Missouri, we have a balanced portfolio of a variety of different generation types. Includes coal, includes nuclear, includes gas, includes renewables, and others, and batteries that we've brought forward recently. Some of these large customers, and frankly not just large customers, but even folks in their everyday life, do have an interest in renewable energy and supporting that. And so we have options to help them meet their own individual goals individually, or also, as a business. And so part of the large load tariff that the commission approved includes a couple of different clean energy or renewable energy type programs where these large load customers can essentially subscribe to renewable energy options because they prioritize that or have their own goals. And from an affordability perspective, they're paying a premium for that, and that's helping to reduce the costs for everybody else as well. So it's a part of our broad portfolio. It's a part of how we're serving individual data centers as well as individual customers. I think it was discussed on a earlier session this morning that not one specific generation type is serving one specific customer. It's all of our generation resources together that are serving all of our customers.
Well, we are at time. I just want to thank the panelists for the conversation. If you have more questions, I encourage you to catch them outside. Thank you.